Welcome back, everyone, to session 2. Again, my name is Vincent Sturgeon, and today we're going to be going over the basics of editing presentations, how to add songs, how to edit maybe a sermon presentation, and that's all going to be done through the editor. So to start, we're just going to make a presentation here. And remember from last time, you just go up to your library, and if you want to make a non-song presentation, you just go into default here, and we'll add a presentation here, a new presentation, and we're going to call it editing. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it announcements. I always name it, let's call this post-service announcement loop. So we'll create that. Then as you can see, it automatically pops up with the blank slide. Now, in order to edit this, we have to get into the edit mode. So there are two ways to go about that. You can click on it and then hit edit up here in the top, and that opens up our editor. Or you can go back to show, and then we can actually right click on it and click edit slide. Those are both ways to get into the actual slide editor. Now once you get into the slide editor, it looks a lot like PowerPoint. Maybe something that you're familiar with using before. On the left, you're going to have all your slides. Then on the left, you're going to have all of your objects, such as text or shapes. That's kind of a lot like Photoshop on the left here. And then all of your changes that you're going to make are going to be on the right-hand side. So what you can do is you can use this one as a slide. I typically like to leave one blank. And the reason that is maybe you want to add a background onto it later. Maybe you want to put text, like a generalized text in the future. Just leave one blank. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to create new slides. An announcement loop, you're going to have all your announcements in there. So typically you're probably going to have 4 or 5 announcements. And then they're going to be cascading down the left-hand side here. So I'm just going to go up here to the plus button and just click and add new slide. Add new slide. It should look pretty familiar to PowerPoint presentation at this point, if you're familiar with that. And then now we have some slides in here. And each of these are independent, so I can click on this one, and then I'm just going to go in here, and as you can see, I have an object, a text block object. And then in order to get this, again, it's just like any kind of, it's your PowerPoint, your Word, any kind of those, maybe Illustrator if you're used to that, or InDesign. You just click on it twice in order to get into it. And say you want to, let's do Women's Bible Study. And it's going to be on Wednesdays, if I could spell, at 6 p.m. All right, so that's your text, and that's going to be, and you'll see it pop up over here. Now that's kind of boring, and this is going to be reflected in what's going to be your slide. So if you go back to show, you'll see it now shows up in your announcement loop as a text object. The problem is that that's super small. You're not going to be able to see that very well from very far away. So we're going to go back and edit the slide. Click on it again, double click, and then you can just select all, either Command A or Control A. And on the right hand side, you'll see we have 3 different ways to edit this text. We can change the shape of it, meaning that we can actually add a shape to this text. We can edit the text itself, or we can add how it builds in. So just the main thing that we're going to focus on is the text. We need this to be maybe a different font, or we definitely need to be larger. So what I'm going to do is, again, this should look like a lot like Word or PowerPoint, so this should be familiar to you. So here's your font size. We're going to increase that. I would say for most slides that you're going to be editing, under 80 is too small for most of your slides. If you have so much text that you have to be under 80, you need to think about removing some of the text. So we're at 90. Depends on your background, but you might want to change the color here. On PC, your color wheel is going to look differently because the way that Microsoft, the way that Apple does their color profiles is different. So yours is going to look different, but you can still change it. Let's change it to maybe a nice red here. Maybe a little darker. There we go. And then we can always bold this. We can change the font maybe to something a little more fun. And then down here is just your typical shadow. Is like a drop shadow. It'll put a line on the back of it, and you're not going to see it when you're still connected to it. But when you click off of it, now you can see that it definitely has that drop shadow on the back that's kind of giving a false 3D look to it. So let's go back into it. You can stroke it. You can put you know, a line around the outside of the text. You can say lines only, meaning that you only want it to do certain things with certain lines. You can put it in a bulleted list if you want to, which is not really necessary for, this might be necessary for sermon text, but probably not for announcements, so we're going to take that off. Or select all and then take the list off of that. I don't need this to be a list. Like that. Alright, so now we're back to it being normal. And then if you want to link the text to something, you can, as in you can have it go to a different slide automatically. You can have it go to a stage message, but it's not really necessary at this point. We're just gonna, this is for our main screen. So we have a pretty large text here for us to edit. Now the other thing that's on here on the slide build, or on this text build, that is very important is how it scales. For instance, if I wanted this to, my container is this box right here. If I wanted this to fill this container, I would go back into here and I would say I want this the text to fit to the container, and it's going to then adjust the container to now fit that text. Now if I undo that, and if I say now I want to scale the text up to fit the container, it's going to make the text bigger, and it does. So let's go back. If I want to scale the text down to fit the container, now I'll do that as well. Or I can scale both depending on how I have the container. Why is this important? Because in the future, you may or may not change this text container depending on what you have in this text container. Meaning that this may not always say Women's Bible Study Wednesdays at 6 p.m. It may change to Women's Bible Study Wednesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. And if we add and Thursdays, now you see how it automatically adjusts to that container, the text itself. So, or you may want this to be a little bit smaller. Maybe you want the text container, you know, a little smaller, and you want maybe to grow a little bit on the edges here. That text is now going to come up or down in size based upon the container instead of otherwise. So that's a good option to have if you know you're going to be changing it from week to week. The other thing that we can do to make this pop a little more, because if you go back to show, we'll click on it again. It's pretty big. Red's kind of a hard color to see, but what we can do is we can add an object to it. So we're going to go back and we're going to add the slide. We're going to add an object to it. We're going to add a shape. Now in this little plus button up here, we can add more text boxes. We can add a ton of different shapes. We can add a media, a background, a lower third, some kind of transparency. We can add a video input if we so choose to do that. We can add a website link, like if you want to showcase your website on your web page, you can do it that way. But most often you're going to be using some kind of shape. So I'm going to choose just a rectangle, and it'll pop up. And then I can adjust the bounds here in order to meet my bounds. You'll see the yellow guidelines here to what your current container text is. So I'm just going to match my container text for my text. There it is. And then I'm going to change the color of this. Now if you go up here, now it says shape because there's no text anymore. So I'm going to go to shape. And then I can adjust the color of it to maybe just a nice light gray. And then with this shape, you can also change the stroke. I can shadow the object itself. I can stroke the object itself. I can feather it, which means I'm adding a little bit of opacity on the outside of it. I can change that, as you'll see that. I can change the visibility of it when it actually shows up. But for mostly, you're just going to change the color. And then what you need to do is, like in a Photoshop or maybe your objects layer of of Microsoft PowerPoint, you need to change the orientation. So you just need to drag and drop the rectangle below the text so the text shows up on top. And now we see we have a really nice element where the text pops, it's large, it's being highlighted and accented by this object. And so it's just going to, when you see it up on the screen, it's going to make it look really nice. So if we go back to show and we click on this now, it just shows up there. You could, to make it pop a little more, we'll take the text here, we'll take off the shadow, and now it looks pretty one-dimensional in terms of text, but with the object in the background, it'll make it look so much nicer and so much cleaner on that. And now remember, if you go up to your media bin, you can always add in a background behind it and make that look professional. So that's the reason why we want to edit this text within the text editor and add some kind of object element behind it. Because if we didn't have, let's just go ahead and edit this. If we go ahead and turn off the rectangle and we show, there we go. Clear all here. We'll just delete this. If we go here and then show it, it's hard to see. You can see that some of the light areas right here, we can see the text, but this dark area it's just impossible to read the Thursdays, especially when you get it on a screen. So that's why we add objects behind it in order to make this text pop. So we'll clear that out and we'll go back to edit. And then you can do this for each and every one. I can go into this and I can edit the text here, and maybe this is a church potluck Sunday after service. You can change it however you want. You can just put Sunday after service on one line here, and then we'll select all and we'll change the font here to something really big. Or again, you can go up here and say scale text up so it's really big, and then I can change my bounding box here, adjust it to the sides. Maybe I want after service now to be on a separate line, so I'll just enter there, and then I can change again. Maybe it's Christmas. It's a Christmas potluck, so I'm going to change it to a dark purple, maybe a little darker than that. It's a blue, so a nice purple. And then I'm going to, let's go ahead and put a shadow on this, a drop shadow, and you can change the angle of it. Maybe we want it to be a nice 90 here. And then we can always increase the opacity or the transparency of it. And then it won't show up until you click off. So there we go. And then we have the problem of, well, that's not going to be easy unless you have some kind of white background. That's not going to be easily read. So now we're going to need to scale this down just a tiny bit. Or you know what? We'll just put it in the center here. And let's go ahead and add a circle. And then I'm going to increase. So when you do certain shapes, if you let's do that again. If we add a shape here and we add a circle, if you just drag and drop one of these bounding bars right here, it's going to distort the shape. To fix that, hit the Shift button and hold the Shift button as you drag, and that will make it completely perfect in shape. And again, the guidelines here will help us in order to get that perfect. Maybe make this a little bit larger here so it fits the entire screen. And then now I'm going to take my text, I'm going to pop it up. And because we have this text where it says I want it to scale up or down to fit the container, I can now adjust my container to fit my object. And it's going to change the size of this. All right. And then perhaps we'll change the shape color to maybe well, we'll go with maybe a nice, maybe a gray. So something like that. I mean, you can play around with it, obviously be artsy with it. You can also do, instead of a color, you can do a gradient. So if you wanted to kind of Maybe go from maybe a dark gray here to maybe a green, maybe a darker green, or you can actually just change it here. Let's go to a light red here. And I can change the opacity of that as well. Yeah, so you can play around with that. And so we have a nice fill there. You can turn the fill off. So now we have an element, we have a text, and then when it actually shows up on here, we'll be able to see that. Again, play around with it. This is not at all a finished product of what I would ever do, but you guys get the idea of what that looks like. Something that I would have done in the past, I'll give you an example. We'll get rid of this media here, is, here we go. So as you can see, I have a background on here, and that's this little icon up here. It says above the clouds JPEG is what my background is. But I went ahead and edited this. I did this for a retreat. And what this is saying is this is not original to the background. The background was just the clouds and the nice kind of sunrise going on here. But I felt that the title of the retreat needed to be said, so I went ahead and added just a pretty simple underlined text here with a kind of a fun font, a sign painter font. And again, your fonts are going to change depending on whether you're on Mac or PC. I have a kind of a heavily blurred shadow here, and that's how I got around. The person who did the retreat didn't have a finished title slide for me. So I went ahead and built the title slide after they gave me the JPEG. So that's one way to go about it. Or else I also have this nice welcome, which I, again, have a fun font, kind of changed the color of it to match a little bit of the horizon here. Or I also have an exit. Again, it's just a text element. I could have added a shape here. You know, I could have had a rectangle across this horizon line. And then change the color of that shape, maybe to a little darker orange here. Change this down over here, and now I have that. I'd probably change the opacity so I can still see some of the that nice sunrise. Maybe do something like that to make that good evening pop a little more. But you get the idea of what's going on here. So this is how you edit a slide for announcements or for offering or really maybe a communion slide. If you want to create your own slide, this is how you go about it. Now, this is not how you go about it for sermons. For a sermon text, it's completely different. So we'll go to this sermon here. And again, I already have one blank in here. I can go ahead and right-click and remove this background right here. So I just have a blank slide here. You can put your sermon series banner in there. You can put maybe who the pastor is. You can, if you just want to have a nice kind of looping background, whatever. This is blank. In order for you to put Bible text in here for your sermon, you need to go up here and go all the way over to Bible. Now, if this is your first time ever using this, you're going to need to go ahead and buy a Bible. In order to do that, you need to go over to Options. You need to go to Bibles here. And then you need to get Bibles. And unfortunately, in ProPresenter, there's no such thing as a free good Bible. NIV, NRSV, which I use, NASB, ESV, Message, all of these Bibles are something that you have to purchase for $15 a piece. So in order to do that, you would just go ahead and click the one that you want, and then just go ahead and purchase it. Then when you're done with that, you would go back into, it would then show up under your purchased Bibles here, and then you just hit the install button. So I already have the NRSV, which is the version I use, installed as a Bible. And then if you go to slide options, there are a bunch of different options of how to show the Bible text in your slide. So I like my passage reference to be in the very last slide. I don't want them to know, for me, I don't want them to know the references for each and every slide. So at the very end of whatever I'm talking about that day, they get a passage, the reference. I also have a new slide for every new verse. So you can say, if you don't want that, it's going to try to slam as many lines into one slide as possible, meaning that you might have more than one verse, so you might have a weird break on a verse. I like this break on a new verse because typically a verse fits nicely onto one slide. You can also show the verse numbers per slide. I think that's a little messy personally, depending on your theme, but you can also get rid of that. If you purchase a Bible that uses a red letter font, if you don't want the red letter font and you want to stick with your font, you need to hit preserve font color, and it'll get rid of the default red letter text of Jesus and put in your own font. So that's that there. And then you can always have a different transition for each one. So if you have not set up a Bible before, you're going to want to go ahead and do that. If you have maybe multiple preachers who use different versions, maybe one of you has ESV, one of you has NASB, you have to purchase the different Bible for each one. And then when you come over here, you would have to select which one you want to use from week to week. So for right now, I'm going to look up, let's just say John 1:1, right? So we'll do 1 through 10. So then it shows up right here, and they have different options here of a theme. Right now I'm using kind of a lower third theme. If you wanted just if you click on this theme here, if you wanted just a typical, we'll do a black here. If you wanted just scripture, that's a fairly good one, then it's going to change how it looks on here. And you can use whatever theme, and we'll talk about in a different video how to add themes and adjust themes. So that's that. And now we have all of our text in here. The problem is that, again, intuitiveness, you would never go into Bible, type in your scripture reference, and then use this in order to go through your slides during a service. You could do that, but you're adding a lot more work for your people who are running the media. There's a much easier way. If you already have your sermon presentation selected here, if you go down to the bottom left and you hit Save As, and then go to Copy to Selected Presentation, once you go into Show, which is just your normal main window, now all those Bible verses are here. And from week to week, I can just delete these slides. I can go into my Bible. I can put a new reference, maybe Philippians 3:14 and through 16, and now I can go ahead and take these, save as, copy to selected presentation, and now I have the next week's in there. And that is much easier to change week to week than having them come in here, type the Bible verse, click on these, because again, as we learned last time, if you have a playlist with your sermon already linked in here, now my sermon link of my playlist already has my scripture reference. And it'll already have my background or my sermon banner week to week. This is a much easier way to do that. So, and you can go in here and edit the slides. You could go in here and create a presentation for sermon and copy and paste from the internet. You could absolutely do that. But it's much easier just to go to the Bible and copy selected presentation because they already have it here for you. I know it's a little inconvenient to spend $15 per version of the Bible that you want, but in the end, it's way worth it to do that. All right. So the last thing I'm going to show you, and we'll do this somewhat quickly, is how to add songs. There are two ways to add songs. Again, I can go into songs here. I could add a new presentation. I can name it Song 1. I could go on the internet. I could copy and paste lyrics from some lyric website. I could go into Song 1 here. I could edit the slide, and then I could just copy and paste that text of that song into here. You could absolutely do that. There's a much easier way for every church out there, and that's to add it by Song Select. If you don't know what Song Select is a paid subscription, which every church should have legally, where you basically pay a fee to use the rights of the songs on Sunday morning. So if you are singing any song that you don't own, which you are, you need to have CCLI to protect yourself from copyright infringement. Which, if you're singing a song and you don't have CCLI, you are copyright infringing. And then additionally, if you are streaming online and you're not paying for the streaming license on CCLI, you're additionally hurting yourself in terms of infringing upon the copyright. So that being said, you need to have CCLI. And ProPresenter can link to your CCLI account so you can input the songs from CCLI, the song select portion. So I'm going to go into ProPresenter. You have to set this up in order to do that. You go to ProPresenter, you need to go to Preferences, and then you need to go to Services. And when that pops up, as you can see, there's a song select portion down here. And for our users, just our church name. So you just click this to log in. You'll log into your song select account, and then that's it. You're done. Now, in order to add a song select song into here, you need to go to Search. So we'll go to Search. And there's two ways to search. You can search a presentation you already have. So I know that I have Go Tell It on the Mountain. So I already have that one. I don't need to worry about adding that one in. But if you don't have one in, say I want to do Alive by Hillsong Young and Free. I'm going to go, first I can check if I have it already, which I don't. And then now I can go into Song Select. I'm going to look up Alive. And the great thing about Song Select is there are a lot of Alives. But I know that it's by Aiden King because he's part of Hillsong Young and Free. So I can see the authors of this text, so I want to go in here. And I can even preview it. I was lost with the, yep, this is the Alive that I want. And now I can go into Import. Now don't automatically hit Import when you're on the screen. It's going to give you a pretty good idea of what you want. It'll tell you how many paragraph breaks you want. It tells you how many delimiters you want per slide, meaning how many lines do you want per slide. I want 3. And then it also tells you where you want this destination. By default, your library is going to show up as default. Again, if you did what I suggested to you from the last video, you're going to want to change this to songs. So when this is imported, it'll automatically be added to your songs section of the library, which is important to do. But now before you hit import, you need to edit this. So I'm going to hit edit. And as you can see, I have, for the most part, I have about 4 lines per slide. I don't like that. So what I want to do is I'm going to reflow. This is what this is, a reflow. And there are 2 ways to go about this. You could import this and then go back and hit the reflow button up here. But it's so much easier just to do it at the very beginning. So I'm going to go in here, and what you need to do is you need to have 2 things as part of your song reflow. What you need to do is first you need a blank slide at the very beginning, and this is for your backgrounds. If you add a background to this, it's just messy. It's going to be hard to read. You need to have a slide dedicated to background. So what you're going to do is you're going to insert slide break, or you can hit Command Return. I'm going to insert slide break, and I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to hit this little drop down button. And there are a lot of different actions, but what you want to focus on is the group. So I'm going to go to group, and then I'm going to go down to background. Now, this is not one of your normal, your default groups. So if you don't see this in there, you just go to Other, you type in background, you change the color to one that you want. I usually use white, and then you hit Save Label. And then it'll be there for you every single time you need it. So I choose this one to be background, and then I also add one called blank, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So this is going to be my background. And then, but the problem is that it automatically, everything after that up into the next group is selected background. Well, this is not a background, this is my verse 1. So I'm going to select this group and name this verse 1. And then now I can go ahead and separate all my lines. So for me, it depends on the song, but typically I like to have 2 lines per song. And then I can go in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and Option Enter if you're on Mac. And then now it automatically puts a split in there, a new slide for the other two text here. And I'll do the same thing here. I just put at the end of that row, I'll put another slide here for verse 2. Now it looks much cleaner in terms of being able to read it. So we'll go to the pre-chorus here. Because you are my freedom, we lift you higher, we lift you higher. I'm going to go ahead and option click that. Now, if you feel that this is too long, you can always, because you are, and then you are my freedom, and then I can put an option here, or we lift you higher, and then we can put maybe this here, or same thing, your love, never ending, and then maybe the O's on its own. You can do whatever you want on that. I think it's fine. This one is the fun way it is. And then we get to the chorus, you're alive in us, needs to be split. And it depends on how you want things. A lot of the times, if something's in parentheses, it's something that's done by the band, but not necessarily needs to be sung by the rest of the congregation. So typically, if it's in parentheses, I get rid of it. And then we go to verse 3. We need to option click that. Or again, we can insert slide break here. It's the same function. So we have 2 lines per slide. I'll go to verse 4 so I can have 2 lines per slide. And then again, this is my preference. If it has a parentheses in here, it means it's breaking up a syllable. They don't actually sing everything. They sing everything. But when you're looking at it, a lot of people, especially the older people in our congregation, do not understand the way that's read. So I changed that just to be the regular word. And now we have the chorus. We'll section this out again. And at the very end of this, what I do is I add another slide break, and I change the very last slide to a blank. And the reason that I do this is because CCLI requires that you have the song information, the copyright information on a slide. So I just select that in the preferences to be at the last slide. And if you don't, then your last slide is going to be, if you don't have a blank one, your last slide is going to be a text slide that you need. And so you're going to have some nasty CCLI copyright text on top of your sung text. It's going to be a nightmare. So you need to have a blank one just for the copyright text. And that's important. So now it looks good. You're going to want to intuitively add a bunch of, like say, the actual flow of the arrangement. You're going to say, well, there's a pre-chorus after this chorus. There's a chorus after this pre-chorus. Don't do that here. This is just your bare bones. When you're importing a song, this is your bare bones song importation. I'll show you in a future video how to arrange it differently. All you need is just one iteration of each section. You don't need 2 verse 2s right now. You don't need 2 choruses or 3 choruses. Just do the bare bones. Have a background at the very beginning, have a blank slide at the end, and then leave it alone. And then when you're done, just hit import, and now it's in our song library, and we can use this from time to time. And then now the background, I can just go ahead and pop a nice little background in here, and then there goes my text. So that's what today's session's about: how to edit slides, how to add songs and sermon text. Again, if you have any questions, please comment below on the YouTube video. The next section is going to be, now that we have our flow, now that we have our songs and our presentation, how do I further edit and arrange these elements to make it look like it flows? So that'll be the next section. We'll talk about arrangements for songs. We'll talk about adding actions. We'll talk about how to automatically link countdowns and all of that. So hope to see you next time, and have a great day.